win anymore. We don't make good deals anymore.
My philosophy on radical Islamic terrorism is very simple. We win, they lose.
The world is a better place. It's a safer place when we are the strongest military in the world.
I believe we have an obligation to help people who live in the shadows.
We were fiscally responsible. We took leadership positions. We were innovative.
We must restore our place as the leader and indispensable power of the free world.
We are going to make America great again.
Tonight, live from the Peace Center in Greenville, South Carolina, CBS News brings you the Republican presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson. This holiday weekend, as America honors our first president, we're about to hear from 6 men who hope to be the 45th. The candidates for the Republican nomination are here in South Carolina for their 9th debate, 1 week before this state holds the First in the South primary. George Washington wrote that the truth will ultimately prevail where there is pains taken to bring it to light. We hope to shed some light on the candidates' positions tonight to help voters make up their minds. So, gentlemen, please join us on stage. Go. With us tonight are retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson of Florida, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, businessman Donald Trump of New York, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, former Governor Jeb Bush of Florida, and Governor John Kasich of Ohio. Now, as most of you have heard by now, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia died today at the age of 79. He was the longest-serving member of the court appointed by President Reagan in 1986. Justice Scalia was the court's leading conservative, and even those who disagreed with his opinions regarded him as a brilliant legal scholar. Please join us and the candidates on our stage in a moment of silence for Justice Antonin Scalia. Thank you. We will talk to the candidates about Justice Scalia and the road ahead when the debate begins in a moment. Before we get started, candidates, here are the rules. When we ask you a question, you will have 1 minute to answer, and 30 seconds more if we ask a follow-up. If you're attacked by another candidate, you get 30 seconds to respond. And here's how we keep time. After we ask a question, you'll get a green light. The yellow light means you have 30 seconds left to finish your answer. And when time is up, the light turns red. That means please stop talking. If you keep talking, you will hear this. You don't want to hear that. Joining me in the questioning tonight, my CBS News colleague, Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett, and Kimberly Strassel, who is on the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. And you can participate in the debate, too, through our partnership with Twitter. Tweet us your questions and comments using the hashtag GOPDebate. So let's begin. First, the death of Justice Scalia and the vacancy that leaves on the Supreme Court. Mr. Trump, I want to start with you. You've said that the president shouldn't nominate anyone in the rest of his term to replace Justice Scalia. If you were president and had a chance with 11 months left to go in your term, wouldn't it be an abdication to conservatives in particular not to name a conservative justice with the rest of your term for the
Well, I can say this. If the president, and if I were president now, I would certainly want to try and nominate a justice. And I'm sure that, frankly, I'm absolutely sure that President Obama will try and do it. I hope that our Senate is going to be able, Mitch and the entire group is going to be able to do something about it in times of delay. We could have a Dianne Sykes, or you could have a Bill Pryor. We have some fantastic people. but this is a tremendous blow to conservatism. It's a tremendous blow, frankly, to our country.
So just to be clear on this, Mr. Trump, you're okay with the president nominating somebody?
I think he's going to do it, whether I'm okay with it or not. I think it's up to Mitch McConnell and everybody else to stop it. It's called delay, delay, delay.
Governor Kasich, I want to get your thoughts on this. Justice Scalia was a real believer, obviously, in the strict word of the Constitution. Now, Harry Reid says that a failure to fill his vacancy would be, quote, shameful abdication of one of the Senate's most essential constitutional responsibilities. Where do you come down on this?
Well, John, first of all, if I were president, we wouldn't have the divisions in the country we have today. And I do want to take a second as we reflected on Judge Scalia. It's amazing. It's not even 2 minutes after the death of Judge Scalia. 9 children here today. Their father didn't wake up. His wife, sad, but, I just wish we hadn't run so fast into politics. Here's my concern about this. The country is so divided right now, and now we're going to see another partisan fight taking place. I really wish the president would think about not nominating somebody. If he were to nominate somebody, let's have him pick somebody that is going to have unanimous approval and such widespread approval across the country that this could happen without a lot of recrimination. I don't think that's going to happen. And I would like the president to just, for once here, put the country first. We're going to have an election for president very soon, and the people will understand what is at stake in that election. And so I believe the president should not move forward, and I think that we ought to let the next president of the United States decide who is going to run that Supreme Court with a vote by the people of the United States of America.
Dr. Carson. Dr. Carson, you, like others, put out a statement after the death was announced, and you said the president should delay. You've written a book on the Constitution recently. What does the Constitution say about whose duty it is here to act in this kind of a situation?
Well, the Constitution actually doesn't address that particular situation. But the fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court obviously is a very important part of our governmental system. And when our Constitution was put in place, the average age of death was under 50. And therefore, the whole concept of lifetime appointments for Supreme Court judges and federal judges was not considered to be a big deal. Obviously, that has changed. And it's something that probably needs to be looked at pretty carefully at some point. But we need to start thinking about the divisiveness that is going on in our country. I looked at some of the remarks that people made after finding out that Justice Scalia had died, and they were truly nasty remarks. And that we have managed to get to that position in our country is truly a shame. And we should be thinking about how can we create some healing in this land. But right now, we're not going to get healing with President Obama. That's very clear. So I fully agree that we should not allow a judge to be appointed during his time.
Senator Rubio, you're a lawyer. Senator Rubio, you're a lawyer. Quickly, can you address the issue of whether the Constitution tells us who has the power to appoint Supreme Court justices? And then also, the Senate Republicans last year floated an idea of removing the filibuster for for Supreme Court nominations. You seemed open to that. What's your feeling on that now?
Well, let me first talk about Justice Scalia. His loss is tremendous, and obviously our hearts and prayers go out to his family. He will go down as one of the great justices in the history of this republic. You talk about someone who defended consistently the original meaning of the Constitution, who understood that the Constitution was not there to be interpreted based on the fads of the moment, but that it was there to be interpreted according to its original meaning. Justice Scalia understood that better than anyone in the history of this republic. His dissent, for example, on the independent counsel case is a brilliant piece of jurist work, and of course, his dissent on Obergefell as well. Number two, I do not believe the president should appoint someone, and it's not unprecedented. In fact, it's been over 80 years since a lame duck president has appointed a Supreme Court justice. And it reminds us of this, how important this election is. Someone on this stage will get to choose the balance of the Supreme Court, and it will begin by filling this vacancy that's there now. And we need to put people on the bench that understand that the Constitution is not a living and breathing document. It is to be interpreted as originally meant.
Quickly, though, on this question. Very quickly, Senator, on this specific question, though, you were once in favor of dropping the threshold to 50 to a majority. You were never in favor of that.
No, I've never. There has been, for example, today, according to the changes Harry Reid made, appellate judges can now be appointed by simple majority, but not Supreme Court justices. And I think today you see the wisdom of why we don't want that to change. Because if that were the case and we were not in charge of the Senate, Harry Reid and Barack Obama would ram down our throat a liberal justice like the ones Barack Obama has imposed on us already.
Governor Bush, I'd like to ask you, conservatives for a long time have felt like their Republican presidents have picked justices that didn't turn out to be real conservatives.
Right.
Bernie Sanders has said he would have a litmus test. He would make sure that he appointed a justice who was going to overturn Citizens United. If they can have a litmus test, what about you? Would you have a litmus test for a nominee, and what would it be?
Not on specific issues, not at all. I think the next president, if I'm president, I'll appoint people, I'll nominate people that have a proven record in the judiciary. The problem in the past has been we've appointed people thinking you can get it through the Senate because they didn't have a record. And the problem is that sometimes we're surprised. The simple fact is the next president needs to appoint someone with a proven conservative record, similar to Justice Scalia, that is a lover of liberty, that believes in limited government, that consistently applied that kind of philosophy, that didn't try to legislate from the bench, that was respectful of the Constitution, and then fight for that nomination to make sure that that nomination passes. Of course, the president, by the way, has every right to nominate Supreme Court justices. I'm an Article 2 guy in the Constitution. We're running for the President of the United States. We want a strong executive for sure. But in return for that, there should be a consensus orientation on that nomination. And there's no doubt in my mind that Barack Obama will not have a consensus pick when he submits that person to the Senate.
Right. So, Senator Cruz, the Constitution. So, Senator Cruz, the Constitution says the president shall appoint with advice and consent from the Senate, just to clear that up. So he has the constitutional power. But you don't think he should. Where do you set that date if you're president? Does it begin in election year, in December, November, September? And once you set the date, when you're president, will you abide by that date?
Well, we have 80 years of precedent of not confirming Supreme Court justices in an election year. And let me say, Justice Scalia...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Were any appointed in an election year? Or is that just there were 80 years?
80 years of not confirming. For example, LBJ nominated Abe Fortas. Fortas did not get confirmed. He was defeated.
But Kennedy was confirmed in 88.
No, Kennedy was confirmed in 87.
He was appointed in 87. He was appointed in 88. That's the question. Is it appointing or confirming? What's the difference?
In this case, it's both. But if I could answer the question.
Sorry, I just want to get the facts straight for the audience. I apologize.
Justice Scalia was a legal giant. He was somebody that I knew for 20 years. He was a brilliant man. He was faithful to the Constitution. He changed the arc of American legal history. And I'll tell you, his passing tonight, our prayers are with his family, with his wife Maureen, who he adored, his 9 children, his 36 grandkids, but it underscores the stakes of this election. We are one justice away from a Supreme Court that will strike down every restriction on abortion adopted by the states. We are one justice away from a Supreme Court that will reverse the Heller decision, one of Justice Scalia's seminal decisions that upheld the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. We are one justice away from a Supreme Court that would undermine the religious liberty of millions of Americans. And the stakes of this election for this year, for the Senate needs to stand strong and say, we're not going to give up the U.S. Supreme Court for a generation by allowing Barack Obama to make one more liberal appointee. And then, for the state of South Carolina, one of the most important judgments for the men and women of South Carolina to make is who on this stage has the background, the principle, the character, the judgment, and the strength of resolve to nominate and confirm principled constitutionalists to the court. That will be what I will do if I'm elected president.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. All right, we're going to move on to national security here, and we are going to, I want to read a quote from Secretary Robert Gates, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who served for under 8 presidents. And this is what he said about Republican candidates. Quote, part of the concern that I have with the campaign is that the solutions being offered are so simplistic and so at odds with the way the world really works. So in that spirit, we're going to work tonight to be more specific. Mr. Trump, I want to start with you. You've said it as president, you'll get up to speed very quickly. You'll know more quickly as president than any of the experts. So you've been elected president. It's your first day in the Situation Room. What 3 questions do you ask your national security experts about the world?
What we want to do, when we want to do it, and how hard do we want to hit? Because we are going to have to hit very, very hard to knock out ISIS. We're going to also have to learn who our allies are. We have allies, so-called allies. We're spending billions and billions of dollars supporting people. We have no idea who they are in Syria. Do we want to stay that route, or do we want to go and make something with Russia? I hate to say Iran, but with Russia, because we made in the Iran deal, it's one of the worst deals I've ever seen negotiated in my entire life. It's a disgrace that this country negotiated that deal. But very important, not only a disgrace, it's a disgrace and an embarrassment, but very important, who are we fighting with? Who are we fighting for? What are we doing? We have to rebuild our country, but we have to, I'm the only one on the stage that said, do not go into Iraq. Do not attack Iraq. Nobody else on this stage said that, and I said it loud and strong. And I was in the private sector. I wasn't a politician, fortunately. But I said it, and I said it loud and clear. You'll destabilize the Middle East. That's exactly what happened. I also said, by the way, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, attack the oil. Take the wealth away. Attack the oil and keep the oil. They didn't listen. They just started that a few months ago.
Senator Rubio. Just 30 seconds on this question, Senator Rubio. Are those the questions you would ask?
No, I think there are 3 major threats that you want to immediately get on top of. Number 1 is, what are we doing in the Asia-Pacific region, where both North Korea and China pose threats to the national security of the United States? Number 2 is, what are we doing in the Middle East with a combination of the Sunni-Shia conflict driven by the Shia arc that Iran is now trying to establish in the Middle East, and also the growing threat of ISIS? And the third is rebuilding and reinvigorating NATO in the European theater, particularly in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe, where Vladimir Putin is now threatening the territory of multiple countries, already controls 20% of Georgia and a significant percentage of Ukraine.
Let me ask you a follow-up, a full, proper question. Violent extremists are active in 40 countries. Some 80 countries are in different degrees of instability, and so that's just the crises overseas. Barack Obama walked into an economic collapse when he came into office. We face international health crises, from Ebola to Zika. So there's a lot of opportunity for crisis, as you've talked about. What would you point to in your past to show voters that you've been in a crisis and that you've been tested when that inevitable crisis comes when you're president?
Let me just tell you what's happened a couple years ago. One of the hardest decisions you'll ever make in Congress is when you are asked by the president to authorize the use of force in a conflict, because you are now putting your name on behalf of the people of your state behind a military action where Americans in uniform could lose their life. So in 2014, Barack Obama said he would not take military action against Assad unless it was authorized by the Senate, beginning on the Committee of Foreign Relations, where I am one of its members. And it was hard, because you looked at the pictures. I saw the same images people saw. I'm the father of children. I saw the images of these little children been gassed and poisoned by their own leaders. And we were angry. Something had to happen, and there was the sense that we needed to seek retribution. And then I looked at Barack Obama's plan. Barack Obama's plan, which John Kerry later described as unbelievably small, and I concluded that that attack would not only not help the situation, it would make it actually worse. It would allow Assad to stand up to the United States of America, survive a strike, stay in power, and actually strengthen his grip. And so it was a difficult decision to make. And when we only had a few days to look at and make a decision on, and I voted against Barack Obama's plan to use force, and it was the right decision.
Dr. Carson, I want to ask you a question. Dr. Carson, you've said you've had more 2 a.m. phone calls than anybody up on this stage. But when those 2 a.m. phone calls came, you operated on a foundation of all of that amazing medical work that you did, all of that learning. So if you were to be president, though, you wouldn't have the political foundation that hones those instincts when the 2 a.m. phone call comes. So isn't that a liability?
No, it isn't. First of all, let me go back to your first question for me. It wasn't phrased as who gets to nominate Supreme Court appointees. Of course, that's the president. So I know that there's some left-wing media who would try to make hay on that. Secondly, thank you for including me in the debate. 2 questions already. This is great. Now, as far as those 2 a.m. phone calls are concerned, judgment is what is required. And the kinds of things that you come up with are sometimes very, very difficult and very unique. One of the things that I was known for is doing things that have not been done before. So no amount of experience really prepares you to do something that has never been done before. That's where judgment comes in. And that, I think, is a situation that we're in right now, a situation that we have never been in before with the kinds of threats that pose real danger to our nation, and it comes in very handy in those situations.
Governor Kasich, Russia is being credited with bombing U.S.-backed rebels on behalf of Assad in Aleppo in Syria. They've also moved into the Crimea, eastern Ukraine. You said you want to punch them in the nose. What does that mean? What are you going to do?
John, first of all, look, we have to make it clear to Russia what we expect. We don't have to declare an enemy or rattle a sword or threaten, but we need to make it clear what we expect. Number one is we will arm the folks in Ukraine who are fighting for their freedom. They deserve it. There'll be no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Secondly, an attack on NATO trumped up on any excuse of Russian-speaking people, either in the NATO countries or in Finland or Sweden, is going to be an attack on us. And look, I think we have an opportunity as America to put something really great together again. The Egyptians, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Gulf states, they all know they're at risk. When we look into Europe, we look at France, we look at Germany and the migrants, we look at Belgium, we look at Britain. Everybody now is being threatened by radical Islam. We have an opportunity to lead. You know, the fact of the matter is the world is desperate for our leadership. Sometimes they may make a remark here or there that we don't like, but frankly, the world needs us, and we have an opportunity now to assemble a coalition of the civilized people, those who respect civilization, the rights of women, the rights to protest, to be able to reassert our leadership all across this globe again and make sure this century is going to be the best we've ever seen.
Governor Bush,
Yep.
you said defeating ISIS requires defeating Assad, but wouldn't that also put us into conflict with Russia, a country that supports Assad? So doesn't that mean effectively Assad's there to stay?
No, it doesn't, and that's the problem. The lack of leadership in this country by Barack Obama, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, thinking that this is a policy that works, this policy of containment with ISIS, it's a complete, unmitigated disaster. And to allow Russia now to have influence in Syria makes it harder, but we need to destroy ISIS and dispose of Assad to create a stable Syria so that the 4 million refugees aren't a breeding ground for Islamic jihadists. This is the problem. Donald Trump brought up the fact that he would want to accommodate Russia. Russia is not taking out ISIS. They're attacking our team, the team that we've been training and the team that we've been supporting. It is absolutely ludicrous to suggest that Russia could be a positive partner in this. They are on the run. They are making, every time we step back, they're on the run. The question that you asked was a really good one about what you would do. What 3 things would you do? I would restore the military. The sequester needs to be reversed. I would have a strategy to destroy ISIS. And I would immediately create a policy of containment as it relates to Iran's ambitions and to make clear that we are not going to allow for Iran to do what it's doing, which is to move towards a nuclear weapon. Those 3 things would be the first and foremost things that we need to do in 2017.
Mr. Trump, you were mentioned here. You did say you could get along very well with Vladimir Putin. You did at one point say, let Russia take care of ISIS.
Call me a genius. I like him so far, I have to tell you. Let me just tell you this. Jeb is so wrong. Jeb is absolutely so. That's just so you understand. You know what that is? That's Jeb's special interest and lobbyists talking. Look, let me just tell you something. Jeb is so wrong. You got to fight ISIS first. You fight ISIS first. Right now you have Russia, you have Iran, you have them with Assad, and you have them with Syria. You have to knock out ISIS. They're chopping off heads. These are animals. You have to knock them out. You have to knock them off strong. You decide what to do after. You can't fight 2 wars at one time. If you listen to him and you listen to some of the folks
that I've been listening to. That's why we've been in the Middle East for 15 years, and we haven't won anything. We've spent $5 trillion in the Middle East because of thinking like that. We've spent and Lindsey Graham, who backs him, who had 0 on his polls. So let me just tell you something. We've spent. I only tell the truth, lobbyists. We've spent $5 trillion all over the middle. We have to rebuild our country. We have to rebuild our infrastructure. You listen to that, you're going to be there for another 15 years.
All right, Governor Bush, please respond.
So the very basic fact is that Vladimir Putin is not going to be an ally of the United States. The whole world knows this. It's a simple, basic fact. They're not taking out, they're not even attempting to take out ISIS. They're attacking the troops that we're supporting. We need to create a coalition, Sunni-led coalition, on the ground with our special operators to destroy ISIS and bring about stability. And you can't do that with Assad in power.
We're supporting troops that we don't even know who they are.
Okay,
We're supporting troops that we don't even know who they are.
Trump. All right.
We have no idea who they are.
Gentlemen, I think we're gonna leave that there. I've got a question
for Senator. This is from a guy who gets his foreign policy from the shows.
Oh,
this is a guy who thinks that Hillary Clinton was a great negotiator in Iran. We're living in dangerous times.
In New Hampshire.
This is a man who insults his way to the nomination.
44 million.
All right, ladies. All right.
Give me a break.
Gentlemen, let's leave it there so I can ask a question of Senator Cruz, who's also running for president. Senator Cruz, you've talked about the first Gulf War as being a kind of model for your focused and determined effort to go after ISIS. But there were 700,000 ground troops as a part of that. So, and you don't have a ground component to your plan. Why?
Well, we need to focus on what the objective is. You know, your question about the first 3 questions you would ask in the Situation Room, I think it is a problem if the President and Commander-in-Chief we've elected does not have the experience and background to understand the threats facing this country coming in on day one. If you look at the threats facing this country, the single gravest threat, national security threat, is the threat of a nuclear Iran. That's why I pledged on day one to rip to shreds this Iranian nuclear deal. And anyone that thinks you can negotiate with Khamenei does not understand the nature of Khamenei. When it comes to ISIS, we've got to have a focused objective. One of the problems of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, and sadly, too many establishment Republicans in Washington, is they focus on issues unrelated to protecting this country. They focus on nation building. They focus on toppling governments to promote democracy, and it ends up undermining our national security. Now, with regard to ISIS, we need a commander-in-chief that sets the objective. We will utterly defeat them because they have declared war. They've declared jihad on us. Now, what do we need to carry that out? We need overwhelming air power. We need to arm the Kurds, who can be our boots on the ground. And if ground troops are necessary, then we should employ them. But it shouldn't be politicians demonstrating political toughness. It should be military expert judgment carrying out the objective set out by the Commander-in-Chief.
Just very quickly, 30-second follow-up. You've said that essentially the Kurds would be the American ground forces in there. The criticism that experts have on that is that the Kurds only can work within their territory. If they take larger amounts of territory, you have an ethnic war with the Arabs. So the Kurds can't really do as much as you seem to be putting on their backs.
We have Kurds in both Iraq and Syria. They are fighting ISIS right now. They are winning victories right now. ISIS is using American military equipment they've seized in Iraq. And the Obama administration refuses to arm the Kurds, the Peshmerga, the fighting forces who've been longtime allies. We ought to be arming them and letting them fight. Now, if we need to embed special forces to direct our overwhelming air power, if it is required to use ground troops to defeat ISIS, we should use them, but we ought to start with using our incredible air power advantage. The first Persian Gulf War, we launched 1,100 air attacks a day. Today, we're launching between 15 and 30. We're not using the tools we have, and it's because the Commander-in-Chief is not focused on defeating the enemy.
All right, Mr. Trump. On Monday, George W. Bush will campaign in South Carolina for his brother. As you said tonight, and you've often said, the Iraq War and your opposition to it was a sign of your good judgment. In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing, close quote. When you were asked what you meant by that, you said, for the war. for the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should have been impeached?
First of all, I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder. I have my wife and I have my son. That's all I have. I don't have this. So let me just tell you, I get along with everybody, which is my obligation to my company, to myself, etc. Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way you want, and it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say, and he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush. When a member on the stage's brother gets attacked, the brother gets to respond.
Do I get to do it 5 or 6 times or just once
nice.
responding to that? So here's the deal. I'm sick and tired of Barack Obama blaming my brother for all of the problems that he's had. And frankly, I could care less about the insults that Donald Trump gives to me. It's blood sport for him. He enjoys it, and I'm glad he's happy about it. But I am
$22 million
sick and tired of him going after my family. My dad is the greatest man alive in my mind. And while Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did. And he's had the gall to go after my
World Trade
mother.
Center came
He's
down
had the
during
gall
your brother's
to go after
reign.
my mother.
Remember that.
Hold on.
Let me finish this. He's had the gall to go after my mother.
That's not keeping
Look, I
us
won
safe.
the lottery when I was born 63 years ago and looked up and I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
not about my family or his family.
Okay.
This is about the South Carolina families that need someone to be a commander-in-chief that can lead. And I'm that person.
Governor Kasich, would you weigh in on? Governor Kasich, please weigh in.
I got to tell you, this is just crazy, huh? This is just nuts, okay? Jeez, oh man. I'm sorry, John.
Wait, why is it nuts? Talk about it. Give us your sense of.
Oh, well, listen, I think being in Iraq, look, we thought there were weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell, who's one of the most distinguished generals in modern times, said there were weapons there. But the fact is we got ourselves in the middle of a civil war. The Sunni, the Shia, and the Kurds never gotten along. In fact, that country was drawn, the borders of that country were drawn after World War I by Westerners that didn't understand what was happening there. The tragedy of it is that we're still embroiled, and frankly, if there weren't weapons of mass destruction, we should never have gone. I don't believe that the United States should involve itself in civil wars. Civil wars are not in our direct interests, and look, I served on the Defense Committee for 18 years and was called into the Pentagon after 9/11 by Secretary Rumsfeld to deal with some of the most serious problems that we faced. The fact is that we should go to war when it is our direct interest. We should not be policemen of the world, but when we go, we mean business. We'll do our job. We'll tell our soldiers, our people in the service, take care of your job, and then come home once we've accomplished our goals. That's what we need to do.
30 seconds, Senator.
Yeah. I just want to say, at least on behalf of me and my family, I thank God all the time that it was George W. Bush in the White House on 9/11 and not Al Gore. I think you can look back in hindsight and say a couple things, but he kept us safe. And not only did he keep us safe, but no matter what you want to say about weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein was in violation of UN resolutions, an open violation, and the world wouldn't do anything about it. And George W. Bush enforced what the international community refused to do. And again, he kept us safe, and I am forever grateful to what he did for this
How
country.
did he keep us safe when the World Trade Center came down? The World, excuse me, I lost hundreds of friends. The World Trade Center came down during the reign of George Bush. He kept us safe. That's not safe. That is not safe, Marco.
All right.
That is not safe.
The World Trade Center came down because Bill Clinton didn't kill Osama bin Laden when he had the chance to kill him.
And George Bush had the chance. By the way, George Bush had the chance also, and he didn't listen to the advice of his CIA.
All right, Dr. Carson, we have a
Can
We have a
real quick?
cleansing-
I'm not going to invite Donald Trump to the rally in Charleston on Monday afternoon.
I don't
My
wanna
brother's
go.
coming to speak.
Yeah.
I'm rescinding the invitation. I thought you might want to come, but I guess not.
All right. Well, Dr. Carson, I've got a question now for you, a moment of pause here. You've said, Dr. Carson, that referring to yourself, that people bought into the idea that, quote, a nice person can't be tough on terrorists. You've called for loosening the rules of engagement for the military, which could lead to more civilian casualties. So explain why those casualties would be acceptable in the fight against ISIS.
Well, first of all, let me just address the Iraq question. You know, I was not particularly in favor of us going to war in Iraq, primarily because I've studied, you know, the Middle East, recognizing that those are nations that are ruled by dictators and have been for thousands of years. And when you go in and you remove one of those dictators, unless you have an appropriate plan for replacing them, you're going to have chaos. Now, fortunately, we were able to stabilize the situation, and it was the current administration that turned tail and ran and destabilized the situation. Now, having said that, in terms of the rules of engagement, I was talking about, you know, Obama has said, you know, we shouldn't bomb tankers, you know, coming out of refineries because there may be people in there or because the environment may be hurt. You know, that's just asinine thinking. And the fact of the matter is, you know, obviously you're not going to accomplish all of your goals without some collateral damage. You have to be able to assess what is acceptable and what is not.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Carson. We're going to have to take a commercial break here. Thank you to all the candidates. We'll be right back with CBS News' 2016 debate in Greenville, South Carolina.
The Iran deal's one of the worst deals I've ever seen negotiated in my entire life. It's a disgrace.
The Constitution is not a living and breathing document. It is to be interpreted as originally meant.
We need to destroy ISIS and dispose of Assad.